So why do we buy a house? Because we have capital growth. Isn't that the reason why people buy property, is that it goes up in value? Yes. And so in doing so, what you do is you have to go to these people. Who are they? The bank, right? So if you go to the bank will give you a loan to buy this house so you can buy it and make money. And in the meantime, what you do is you rent it out to tenants. So what you're hoping the tenants will do is to pay you rent, and the rent will go to pay your mortgage. Right, and that's pretty much what it is. And that's the whole idea of, and the difference between that and what the tenant pay you is your cash flow. And you can rent the property out, you have to have consent to let. Okay. And so that's what you do. So let's go through some fundamentals for those of you who've never bought a house. How do you buy a house? What's the process? What's the first step you need to do? Find a house. All right, where do you find them? You go to estate agents for most people. And then you find a house. How do you select? What criteria? Location. Is location important? Yeah, so in terms of location, you have to balance between whether you can buy a property that you get the capital growth, or you can rent it out easily. Is that the reason? Right, so that's the first thing you do. And then you go to an estate agent, you put in an offer. And do you put in an offer above or below the asking price? Below, all right? So we always give an offer, and if the offer is accepted, what's the next thing you do? You have to apply for what? A mortgage, right? Raise your hand right now if you are not sure whether you can get a mortgage or not. If you're not sure, all right? One person, if you're not sure, you need to find out. Don't make assumptions about you. Some people might think that I might not be able to get a mortgage, but what you want to find out is from a mortgage broker, because circumstances change. You want to find out your circumstances, all right? Then you get a mortgage, and so in the UK we have this thing called BTL. That stands for what? Buy to let. You know, buy to let mortgages are quite unique to this country. I've traveled the world. I've never heard of buy to let outside of the United Kingdom. All right, and in which a buy-to-let mortgage will allow you to just pay the interest without the capital repayment. And they don't care as much what your income is. They do to a certain extent now, but there was a time the bank would not care whether you could afford it or not, provided that your cash flow is positive. They want to make sure that your rental will stack up. So you get a buy-to-let mortgage. Do they give you 100% of it? No, normally they give you what? 75% loan to value, all right? So that means you have to come up with 25% deposit yourself, all right? So I think a lot of people are not investing in property is because, number one, they are not sure whether they can get a buy-to-let mortgage, in which you need to find out. Number two is the deposit, yes or no? The 25%. So if the average price of the property is £200,000, 25% is, you talk about 50 grand in cash, which is quite a lot of money for a lot of people, you know, who's got 50 grand knocking around, right? But if that's the one and only thing that's stopping you from buying a house, then it shouldn't. Because we have to find ways to raise it, yes or no? Because when you raise money, you have to give the investor a return on the investment and the money back. And even if you have to borrow 50 grand, and you know that within the next 6 months or so, you can get that money back into your pocket, would it be much easier for you to raise that money? So I'm going to talk about that process. So you apply for a mortgage, and what's the next step? You apply for mortgage. Then the bank will normally need to do a what? A survey, a valuation, to make sure that what you're buying is worth what you're paying for. Why? Because the bank is loaning you the money secured on the property. The debt is secured on the property. And so we all know what security means. And we can all tell that property is superb because it's one of the only investment where banks would be happy to loan you money based on security. And I remember years ago, I tried to raise a loan from the bank for a new business. And the bank said, well, it's a new business, not comfortable lending you the money. Do you have any security? I said, what security do you need? Do you have any properties? I said, yes, I do, as a matter of fact. So they lend me money, but secure the lending on the property. And that's why I get a lot of investors from Qatar, from Dubai. They are great entrepreneurs, but they have very few assets. So they want to learn how to acquire assets so they can leverage and borrow more money. And that's why property is important, yes or no? All right, so now you've got a property, and then the next thing is, what's going to happen next? After you do the survey, the bank says it's yes, it's okay. What's the next step? You need the solicitors, yes or no? And what do solicitors do? They don't do very much. Pay them a lot of money. Well, they do, in fact. They do legal searches to find out, what are you buying? Right? They do different searches like the title search. Who owns the property? Is the property owned by one person or maybe a few different people? That's the first thing they look at. Number two is they look at any existing security on the property that needs to be paid off before you can buy the property. Right? Is there a mortgage on the property? Is there a secure loan or multiple loans on a property? That's the second thing. They want to look at they do an environmental search to make sure that there's nothing, it's not sitting on some radioactive kind of land, right? You're not buying a property that could cause health issues. They would do searches on any plans by the local authority. Maybe they have plans to build the H2S network, maybe across the field behind you, or maybe they're building some sort of motorway or transport. You need to know all these things, and this part of it is called the conveyancing, right? So the lawyer would do conveyancing. Is it important to do that? Yes. Right? You don't want to buy a property without knowing what goes on, right? And how many lawyers do we need in a typical transaction? 2 lawyers, one for the buyer, and the seller, we need a lawyer as well. Except if you're in the Netherlands. Anyone from Holland? No? In the Netherlands, they use 1 lawyer. They use a notary, or notaris, they call it. The notary will represent both the buyer and the seller. And as long as they're happy that there's no conflict of interest, that the sale will go through. So once the survey comes back, everything is fine, then what's the next step? Well, you transfer your deposit to your lawyer, and then the bank will give you their mortgage offer. And then once the mortgage offer is accepted, then the bank would transfer their remaining 75%, and you transfer your 25% to your lawyer, ready for completion. All right? But before completion, what do you normally do? Exchange contracts. So you both parties sign a contract. So once you've signed a sales and purchase agreement, or SMP, then the deal is sealed. Yes or no? Can either party break the contract? They can. Of course they can. Right? Just because they sign a contract doesn't mean it has to go through. So if one person decides to change their mind, then the other party will have to sue for compensation. And normally, when you exchange contracts, you put down 10% deposit. But it's negotiable. It could be 5%, but normally 10% deposit. But if the other party does not complete, you forego your 10%. Does that make sense? And that's why it's very dangerous for a lot of people who go to developers to secure something off plan. You've heard of off-plan investments. What they do is the developers will get you to sign a sales and purchase agreement, exchange contracts, your S&P, and then you pay a deposit. But what you don't realize is that before completion, you're going to have to settle. You're going to have to settle in full. If you can't get a mortgage, or maybe the property is too high in value and the bank is not loaning you the full 75%, and there's a shortfall, and you can't come up with the shortfall to plug the gaps, then you will lose your deposit, right? And you know, a lot of people during those days, they will, just because they think, oh, it's just a small amount of deposit, I can secure 5 lots of investments, they're speculating, and then they realize when it comes to completion, they can't get a mortgage, or maybe the properties are way overvalued, they become bankrupt. Right? So it's very, very dangerous as well. So let's say everything goes through, you exchange contracts, the next thing is you complete on the deal. And that's it, you become a property owner. And that's it. Right? It's not rocket science, and the lawyers will do all the work for you. But for you, it's important to figure out every property you have a price at which you pay. So what price you pay for a property would determine how much money you're going to make, whether you got yourself a deal or not. And that's very, very crucial. Because if you pay too much for a property, you got yourself a bit like our friends from Malaysia, then it will take you the next 5 years for the market value to catch up. All right? So you have to know that the price and the value are not the same thing. Turn to the person next to you and say, the price doesn't equal the value. All right. The price is what you pay, but the value is what you get. Who said this? Me on Instagram, I know, this morning. But who said this, really? Warren Buffett. All right. A lot of people pay a price not knowing what the value of the property is. The most fastest way for you to lose money in real estate. And if you know what the value of property is, and you can buy at below the market value, that's what BMV is. A lot of people talk about BMV, that stands for what? Below market value. In fact, all they're talking about is below asking price. Below asking price is not the same as below market value. Are we clear about that? Yeah. Okay, good. So that's it.